What if everything you think about your life is just an illusion? What if I told you that since birth, you have been conditioned to see the world in a specific way, following a carefully planned system? The ideas you believe in, the way you see yourself, and even the concepts you consider unquestionable may be just a big show. But don't worry, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is ancient knowledge, kept for millennia by the great sages, but hidden from humanity for disturbing reasons. Hindus call this illusion Maya, a veil that hides reality. Plato explored this idea in his famous allegory of the cave, where prisoners spend their whole lives watching shadows and believing they are real. Now stop and think, what if you are one of those prisoners? Moreover, who really benefits from your imprisonment? The Matrix exists, but it is not made of machines or codes, but of ideas, stories, and beliefs that you've accepted without question. It manifests itself in the rules you follow automatically, in the pre-established script that determines your trajectory from before your birth. Go to school, get good grades, get a job, pay the bills, work until you retire, and then wait for the end of life. If you dare to leave this script, you will be labeled as crazy, irresponsible, or a dreamer. Meanwhile, the system continues to feed on your energy, your attention, and your very existence. But if you have come this far, it is because something inside you has already awakened. You feel that something is wrong. You perceive a void that nothing seems to fill. Maybe you have tried to escape, diving into work, distracting yourself on social media, or seeking momentary pleasures, but the void remains there. This is not a mistake. It is a call. The ancient Egyptians, Greeks, shamans, and masters of the East always warned about this illusion. They spoke of the need to awaken, but this knowledge was suppressed and replaced by a materialistic model where only what can be measured or bought is considered real. The result? Millions of people living on autopilot, believing that this aimless race is normal, but it is not. Now that you have seen the truth, you can no longer ignore it. So stay with me until the end, because I will show you step by step how the great sages have always known this secret. Moreover, I will teach you how to apply it to transform your reality from now on. Before we continue, leave your like and subscribe to the channel, because this journey will expand your mind in a way you never imagined. Prepare yourself, because what follows may change your life forever. The system you live in doesn't need you to wake up. It needs you to obey without questioning. From the moment you were born, an invisible script was drawn for you. Society whispers in your ear, follow the rules, don't ask questions, don't go off the path. Since childhood, you have learned that success has a fixed formula. Study, get good grades, get a job, pay the bills. This cycle imprisons most people. But have you ever stopped to reflect on how there is something strange about this? A model where you work non-stop but never have time, where you constantly strive but never seem to have enough, where you seek recognition but continue to feel a void. What if I told you that this doesn't happen by chance? The system was designed to work like this. It doesn't need you to be happy, just that you are productive. It wants you to consume, to always be tired, distracted by small rewards, without time to question your own existence. Meanwhile, those who run this game profit from your exhaustion. Have you noticed how everything around you has been structured to keep you busy? The media bombards you with news that generates fear and anxiety. Social media traps you in an infinite cycle of distraction. The market teaches you that happiness can be bought in small doses. A new cell phone, new clothes, a trip to escape the life you don't love. But this escape is temporary, and soon you return to the routine that sucks your energy. The worst of all? If you question this system, you're called crazy. If you try to leave the race, they say that you are irresponsible, reckless, a dreamer. But stop and think, why would it be crazy to want a life that makes sense? Why would it be insane to desire freedom? The truth is that the system doesn't want you to think, it wants you to function. But if you are here, reading this, it is because something inside you has already realized that there is something wrong, and this small doubt can be the key to your liberation. But before we talk about that, do you know what happens when we live on autopilot? The alarm clock rings, and even before getting out of bed, your hands are already reaching for your cell phone. Without thinking, you swipe the screen, watch short videos, read alarming news, and respond to irrelevant messages. The day has barely started, but your mind is already overwhelmed. You get up in a hurry, feeling that weight in your chest, a strange sensation that has become part of your life. Another day begins, exactly like all the others. The same steps, the same gestures, the same thoughts, the same worries, as if you were trapped in a movie repeated hundreds of times. But the truth is that you are not living, just following a predefined script. The scariest part? You don't question it. Nobody questions it. Around you, everyone follows the same pattern. The same complaints about work, the same excuses about the lack of time, the same dreams postponed to a future that never comes. It seems that the whole world is hypnotized. What if I told you that this repetition is not a simple coincidence? What if this cycle was not a mistake, but a strategy to keep you trapped? When you live on autopilot, you don't realize that you are being controlled. Now that you see this, reflect. Who really benefits from your imprisonment? The chains that bind you are not physical, but mental. They are beliefs rooted since childhood. You have learned that life is difficult, that money only comes with suffering, that love hurts, and that happiness is a privilege of a few. These ideas were recorded in your mind as absolute truths. Even if you want a different reality, something inside you always pulls you back. This happens because the mind is not concerned with your happiness, only with your survival. And everything that is familiar to you, even if painful, ends up becoming your prison. The worst thing is that this cycle repeats itself without you noticing. Every time a past trauma resurfaces, the reaction is always the same: fear, anxiety, frustration. The same pains come back as if they were programmed. And in a way, they are. Your mind reproduces these patterns like a scratched record, consolidating the identity of a victim. You start to see your story through the lens of suffering, reinforcing the belief that life was unfair, that people betrayed you, that nothing ever works out. But there is a big problem with that. When you see yourself as a victim, you give up your power. And that is exactly what the system wants. Because people who feel powerless do not question, do not create, do not transform. They just survive. While millions of people live trapped in this mentality, struggling to pay the bills and facing their own fears, the system continues to win. But now that you know this, there is something even more important to understand. You believe that you are moving forward, but in reality, you are just running in circles. And this is the next secret that needs to be revealed. You work hard, you make an effort, you do everything right. But if you are always on the move, why does it seem that you never get anywhere? The salary increases, but the bills too. You chase success, but the finish line is always a little further away. Since childhood, they have taught that with dedication and sacrifice, the reward will come. But what if that promise was never real? The truth is that the system never wanted you to leave this game. It keeps you distracted, busy, exhausted, always believing that just one more effort, just one more step, just one more sacrifice, and then, finally, you will be free. But that day never comes. Have you ever watched a hamster running on its wheel? It strives, accelerates, gets tired, but remains in the same place. Now look at your life. The system put you on an identical wheel. You work to pay bills that keep you tied to your own job. You seek happiness in small doses, a weekend, a new purchase, a moment of pleasure, but soon everything returns to normal. You are always busy, but you are not moving forward. And that's exactly how they want you to be. But what if suddenly you stopped running? If you started to question this race? The answer to that is something the system doesn't want you to discover. What if I told you that this truth is not new? That for millennia, great masters have tried to open the eyes of humanity. Jesus, Buddha, Socrates, Hermes Trismegistus. They all taught the same essence, each in their time, each in their own language. But few understood, few were ready. Because this truth is too simple for a mind trained to complicate everything. They tried to show us that the world we see is not the true reality, that we live trapped in an illusion, in a mental game, in an invisible prison. But they also revealed that there is a way out. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." But instead of looking inward, people sought answers outside. They built temples, churches, created rituals, always hoping that someone would lead them to this kingdom, when in fact, the path has never been on the outside. Buddha taught that all suffering comes from one's own mind, that attachments, fears, and desires are invisible chains that imprison us. Socrates challenged people to question their own beliefs because he knew that true wisdom is not in accumulating knowledge, but in unlearning what was imposed. Hermes Trismegistus was even more direct. What is inside is the same as what is outside. What is above is the same as what is below. He revealed something that modern science is beginning to understand. The world does not happen to you, it happens through you. Your external reality is an exact reflection of what you carry inside, but this wisdom was distorted, hidden, forbidden, because an awakened human being cannot be controlled. If all this has already been taught before, why do most people remain trapped? The answer lies in the texts that were erased from history, and that is what we are going to reveal now. The truth has always been accessible, but throughout history it has been hidden, destroyed, and censored. The great masters understood that humanity was not yet ready for certain teachings, and the system took advantage of this. An example is the Gospel of Thomas, one of the oldest writings attributed to Jesus, which was removed from the Bible. The reason? His words went against the control of religious institutions. In this text, Jesus does not talk about a distant God, dogmas, or blind obedience. Instead, he teaches that what we carry within us can liberate or imprison us. If you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. In other words, all the answers are already within us. And this was not the only knowledge hidden. The Emerald Tablet, one of the oldest records of Hermetic thought, speaks of transmutation, but not in the literal sense of transforming lead into gold. The true transformation takes place within the mind. Limiting beliefs can be converted into freedom, fear into wisdom, and ignorance into knowledge. However, over time, these teachings were distorted, trivialized, and reduced to mere symbols without meaning. And why did this happen? Because when a person discovers that they can change their reality and create their own life from consciousness, they become free, and a truly free individual cannot be controlled. Interestingly, even modern science is beginning to recognize truths that were previously considered mysticism. Quantum physics has already shown that reality is not fixed, that particles change state depending on observation, and that consciousness influences the physical world. This means that we have never been hostages of destiny. What we feel, believe, and project directly shapes our existence. But if we know this, why is it still so difficult to break free? Because the most powerful prison of all has no bars or walls. It exists within the mind itself. The real prison is not made of bars, walls, or chains. It exists within you. The system no longer needs to impose control when the mind itself already does that work. From an early age, we have been conditioned to believe that everything we think is real. But what if the mind were nothing more than a mechanism, a gear that repeats patterns? It relives traumas, reinforces fears, fuels doubts, and worst of all, convinces us that we are these emotions and thoughts. But here is something that almost no one says. You are not your mind. Imagine a river with the water flowing constantly. Now think of your thoughts in the same way. Fears, worries, and memories arise and disappear just like the current. The problem happens when, instead of just observing, we let ourselves be carried away by them. When we throw ourselves into the river, it drags us wherever it wants. But what if we did differently? What if we just stayed on the bank watching the water pass by? We would continue to exist, but without being carried away by the current. This has always been the teaching of the great masters. The mind will never stop producing thoughts, but we can learn not to identify with them. And that is where true freedom begins. So, if you are not your mind, what really exists? The past haunts you. The future worries you. But where is the present? Have you ever noticed that your mind is always traveling, reliving mistakes, regretting what has already happened, or projecting fears about what has not yet happened? But tell me, where does the past exist? Only in your memory. And the future? Only in your imagination. The only real moment is now. But the system doesn't want you to realize this because a human being who lives in the present is not afraid of the future, does not carry the weight of the past. He simply is. Now stop for a moment. Breathe. Feel the air coming in, feel the air going out. What is wrong at this exact moment? Nothing. Everything that exists is here, now. This is the secret that spiritual masters have taught for millennia. Buddha said that all suffering comes from the mind, that liberation is in the present. But the mind resists. It wants to pull you back to fears, to anxieties, to the senseless rush. But if you stay present, the matrix collapses. And this is where the big question arises. If time is an illusion, then who are you beyond it? You are not a victim of fate. Life doesn't happen to you, but through you. However, since childhood, they have made you believe the opposite. They said that your happiness depends on luck, the government, the economy, or the decisions of others. But the truth, which has always been hidden, is that your reality is shaped by your own consciousness. Everything you feel, think, and believe manifests around you. This is not just a spiritual concept, but a universal law. Have you ever noticed how people who live complaining always find more reasons to complain, while others seem to attract opportunities effortlessly? This is not a coincidence, but a matter of frequency. The universe does not respond to what you want, but to what you are. You can say that you want prosperity, but if internally you vibrate scarcity, your reality will reflect that lack. You can say that you seek love, but if you carry fear and insecurity, you will attract relationships that reinforce those feelings. Life acts like a mirror, returning exactly the energy you project. That's why some people always seem to find open doors. They have understood how to align their energy with what they desire. The problem is that most try to change reality without first changing themselves. But here is a truth that few have the courage to accept. If you created the life you have today, you can also recreate it. And it is at this point that the greatest power of the human being comes in: free will. You can continue to blame the world and believe that nothing changes, or you can take full responsibility for your life. From that moment on, everything begins to transform. But how to get out of this cycle and rewrite your own story? The answer is not in escaping the matrix, but in awakening within it. Getting out of the matrix does not mean escaping the world. It's not about abandoning everything, living in isolation, or rejecting reality. On the contrary, it is awakening within it. It is looking at what has always been around you and seeing what most do not perceive. The rules you follow were created to limit your potential. The fears that paralyze you were implanted to keep you under control. The incessant search for success, money, and validation is nothing more than an illusion, a trap that keeps you in an endless cycle. If you want to break free from this invisible prison, the first step is to reprogram your mind. And it all starts with silence. The system survives on noise, distraction, chaos. It keeps your attention always busy so that you never realize the truth. But in silence, something powerful happens. Consciousness awakens. That is why the great spiritual masters have always practiced meditation, recollection, and internal observation. Whoever knows himself truly sets himself free. But this is only the beginning. To completely break with the illusion, it is necessary to go further. It is necessary to reconnect with what the system has tried to make you forget: the sacred. You have never been separated from the sacred, but they have made you believe the opposite. They said that God is distant, restricted to temples, scriptures, and rituals, but never within you. They taught that it is necessary to follow rules, pay penances, and depend on intermediaries to connect with something greater. But this idea is an illusion. True spirituality is not trapped in dogmas, but in awakening. The ancients understood this and called this connection logos, prana, chi, or universal spirit. It is an energy present in everything, including you. The system, however, does not want you to discover this truth. A human being who recognizes his divine nature cannot be controlled. If you realize that your essence is part of the whole and that the separation between you and the universe is just an illusion, no one can dominate you anymore. It is not necessary to seek permission to connect to the sacred. This connection happens in conscious breathing, in the silent observation of the present, and in the simple act of existing. But we were taught to ignore this, to look outside for what has always been inside. Now imagine, what if you finally remembered who you really are? If you understood that you've never been away from the source, would you still feel fear, scarcity, or loneliness? No, because whoever awakens understands that he is the universe itself experiencing itself. And here comes the big question. Now that this truth is before you, what do you intend to do with it? Before continuing, tell me in the comments, what was the biggest illusion you have ever unraveled in your life? That moment when you realized that everything was different from what they taught you? I really want to know your answer. So write it there. Oh no, they found us. We need to go now. Ending the Matrix broadcast.